The lights of Hollywood Boulevard flickered like a sea of tiny diamonds, blinding, intoxicating, and infinitely deceptive. Tonight, the world was mine, or at least, it felt that way. Paparazzi flash ignited the night sky, a symphony of light and chaos, all directed at me. My name, Emily Richards, echoed in every scream, every cheer. I smiled, waving gracefully as cameras captured every move, every flutter of my sequined dress. This was my night, the premiere of Twilight's Embrace, the film that critics were already calling a masterpiece. And I was its leading lady. I stepped onto the red carpet, feeling the soft, plush fabric sink under my heels. The questions came fast and loud, but I had learned to navigate the noise. A perfect smile, a playful laugh, it was all part of the dance. I could feel Tom's eyes on me from somewhere in the crowd. My husband's gaze, both a comfort and a reminder of who I was when the cameras stopped flashing. But tonight wasn't about Tom. It was about me. And about him. I spotted him almost immediately. Dressed in a tailored suit that screamed money and power, Daniel Stone stood at the edge of the crowd, a glass of champagne in hand, his eyes fixed on me. He wasn't smiling, not really. His expression was more like admiration mixed with calculation, a hunter sizing up his prey. Daniel was one of the most influential producers in Hollywood, a man whose mere nod could make or break careers. And right now, his attention was all mine. "Emily, darling, you look stunning," he greeted me. His voice smooth and low, the kind that could command a room without raising a whisper. "Thank you, Daniel," I replied, feeling the familiar flutter of nerves mixed with excitement. His presence was magnetic, pulling me in despite the noise and chaos around us. The crowd seemed to blur as he guided me to a quieter corner, away from the prying eyes of the press. He held out a flute of champagne, and I took it, our fingers brushing ever so slightly. "A spark to your brilliant performance," he toasted, his eyes never leaving mine. "You've outdone yourself, Emily." "Thank you. It means a lot coming from you," I said, sipping the champagne, the bubbles dancing on my tongue. The praise felt genuine, but with Daniel, I knew there was always more behind the words. His compliments were currency, calculated, and purposeful. "I have something in mind for you," he continued, leaning closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Something big. A project that will take you to the next level. I want you for the lead role." My heart skipped a beat. Daniel's projects weren't just films, they were events. His movies turned actors into stars and stars into legends. This was the kind of offer that could define a career, the kind that actresses dreamed of but rarely received. "That sounds incredible, Daniel," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though excitement bubbled beneath the surface. "What's the project?" He smiled, a slow, deliberate curve of his lips that sent a shiver down my spine. "We'll discuss the details soon. But let's just say it's a role that will redefine you. One that will show the world a side of Emily Richards they've never seen before." There was something in his tone, an undercurrent that made my skin prickle. This wasn't just about a film, it was about me. About what I was willing to do to stay at the top. Daniel's gaze lingered a moment too long, and in that instant, I understood the unspoken proposition. It wasn't just a professional offer, it was personal, intimate, and dangerous. I hesitated, the champagne glass cold against my fingertips. I thought of Tom, of the promises we'd made to each other. But then I thought of the glittering red carpet beneath my feet, the blinding lights, the cameras, and the thrill of the spotlight. Daniel leaned in closer, his breath warm against my ear. "I'll be in touch, Emily. And trust me, you won't want to miss this opportunity." With that, he slipped away, disappearing back into the throng of Hollywood elites. Leaving me standing there, my mind spinning. The champagne suddenly tasted bitter, the cheers of the crowd hollow. I watched as he mingled effortlessly as if our conversation had never happened. But it had. And now, the choice was mine. As the night went on, I kept smiling, posing, and waving. But Daniel's words echoed in my mind, his proposition a tempting whisper that clung to me like a second skin. I had everything I'd ever wanted. A loving husband, a successful career, but tonight, standing on the precipice of something bigger, I realized that maybe I wanted more. And Daniel Stone was offering it, wrapped in the glittering allure of Hollywood's brightest lights. I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, the soft glow of the vanity lights casting shadows across my face. The makeup was flawless, and my hair was perfectly styled, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was looking at a stranger. I splashed cold water on my wrists, trying to steady my racing heart. Tonight, I was meeting Daniel, and I couldn't let Tom find out. "Emily, you okay in there?" Tom's voice was muffled through the door, but it was close enough to jolt me back to reality. "Yeah, just finishing up," I called back, forcing a cheerful note into my voice. I glanced at my phone. A message from Daniel flickered on the screen, a simple yet commanding text, 8 p.m. "Don't be late." I pushed down the rising tide of guilt and opened the door, greeting Tom with a smile that I hoped looked genuine. He was standing in the hallway, dressed in his usual casual way, his dark hair tousled and eyes full of concern. The sight of him used to bring me comfort, but now it only intensified the knot in my stomach. "I thought we could have dinner at home tonight," Tom said, pulling me in for a kiss. "I picked up that wine you like." Dinner at home. The thought felt like a heavyweight. All I could see was the clock ticking closer to my meeting with Daniel, the opportunity that I couldn't afford to miss. "I'm sorry, babe, but I have to go to a late audition," I lied, feeling the sting of the words as they left my mouth. "It's kind of last minute, but it's important." Tom's expression shifted, a mix of disappointment and understanding. He was used to my unpredictable schedule, but this was the third time this week that I'd bailed on our plans. "Another one? You're already working so hard, Emily. Maybe you should take a break." I forced a laugh, brushing past him to grab my purse. I know, but this one could be big. And you know how it is. No rest for the wicked, right?" The lie came easier than I expected, rolling off my tongue with practiced ease. I could feel Tom's eyes on my back as I fumbled with my keys, his silence heavy with unspoken questions. I couldn't look at him. If I did, I might break. "Don't wait up," I said, my voice too light, too bright, as I hurried out the door. I didn't wait for his response. I couldn't bear it. The drive to the upscale hotel where Daniel had said our meeting felt like a blur. My mind raced, a chaotic mix of excitement and self-reproach. I tried to justify it to myself. This was just another step in my career, a necessary evil. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. Every time I lied to Tom, it felt like I was cutting away at the life we'd built together, piece by piece. I pulled into the valet, my heart pounding as I stepped out of the car. The hotel loomed above me, a glittering tower of luxury and secrets. I adjusted my dress, trying to steady my breathing as I walked through the grand entrance. Past the lobby filled with tourists and businesspeople who had no idea of the decisions being made behind closed doors. Daniel was waiting for me in a private suite, his expression unreadable as always. He greeted me with a casual smile, but there was a predatory glint in his eyes that made my skin crawl and my pulse quicken all at once. "Glad you could make it," he said, offering me a glass of champagne. The bubbles rose slowly, like tiny, trapped thoughts desperate to break free. I didn't have much of a choice. "Did I?" I replied, taking the glass but not drinking. I was already on edge, and I needed to keep my wits about me. Daniel's laugh was low, knowing. "You always have a choice, Emily. But I think we both know why you're here." I sank into the plush armchair across from him, forcing myself to meet his gaze. His confidence was unnerving, but it was also captivating. This was the game he played, dangling dreams in front of people like bait, waiting for them to take the first step into the trap. He began talking about the project, painting a vivid picture of the role he wanted me to play. It was everything he promised, complex, challenging, and destined to be iconic. But as he spoke, his words blurred, merging with the image of Tom's face, his concerned expression etched in my mind. I felt a pang of guilt so sharp it almost made me wince. I'd never been a liar, not with Tom. We built our life on trust and mutual respect, and now I was tearing it apart with every deceitful word. "Are you in, Emily?" Daniel's voice pulled me back. He leaned forward, his eyes searching mine as if daring me to back down. I hesitated, the lie to Tom still fresh in my mind, but I nodded. "I'm in." Daniel's smile widened, victorious. He leaned back, savoring his win. And just like that, I'd taken another step down a path I wasn't sure I could return from. Leaving the hotel that night, I felt the weight of what I was doing more than ever. Tom would be waiting for me at home, believing my story about auditions and career opportunities. I'd walk through the door and lie again, spinning tales of late-night casting calls and rehearsals. I'd kiss him goodnight, pretending that everything was normal, that I was still the same Emily he fell in love with. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was lying to both of us. And the worst part was, I couldn't stop. The morning sun filtered through the curtains, casting a soft, golden light across our bedroom. Tom was still asleep beside me, his breathing steady and peaceful. I watched him for a moment, a familiar pang of guilt tugging at my chest. He looked so innocent, so unaware of the storm brewing just beneath the surface of our lives. I quietly slipped out of bed, careful not to wake him, and made my way downstairs. The house was still, the kind of stillness that usually brought me comfort. Today, though, it felt heavy. I distracted myself with coffee, letting the aroma fill the kitchen as I tried to push away the thoughts of last night, of Daniel, his lingering touch, and the lies I had woven to get there. My phone buzzed on the counter, startling me from my thoughts. A message from Daniel. I glanced back toward the stairs, making sure Tom was still asleep before opening it. Last night was incredible. Let's do it again soon. Same time? The words were innocent enough to an outsider, but to me, they were loaded with implications. I quickly deleted the message, feeling the heat rise to my cheeks. I hated this constant dance of secrecy, but the thrill and promise of something bigger kept pulling me back. I left the phone on the counter and stepped away to pour my coffee. I didn't hear Tom come down the stairs. I didn't see him reach for the phone, his curiosity piqued by the vibration he had heard from the bedroom. It wasn't until I turned around, mug in hand, that I saw him standing there, my phone in his grasp. He was staring at the screen, his brow furrowed, lips pressed into a thin line. "Hey, what are you doing with my phone?" My voice came out sharper than I intended, but I couldn't hide the sudden jolt of fear. Tom looked up, his eyes clouded with confusion and something else I couldn't quite place. "I just saw it buzz, thought it might be important." His explanation was casual, almost dismissive, but the tension in the room was palpable. He handed the phone back to me, his expression guarded. I took it, trying to act like everything was fine, but the way he watched me told me that something had shifted. "Who was it?" he asked, his tone light, but his eyes searching mine. "Oh, just my agent." I lied smoothly, quickly tucking the phone into my pocket. "They want to go over some script notes later." Tom nodded, but his silence spoke volumes. I turned away, pretending to busy myself with the coffee, but I could feel his gaze boring into my back, dissecting every word, every movement. I wanted to believe he had bought the excuse, that he trusted me, but the seed of doubt was already planted. The rest of the morning was a blur of forced smiles and empty conversation. Tom kept glancing at me like he was trying to piece together a puzzle that didn't quite fit. I did my best to act normal, to keep up the facade, but inside, I was crumbling. Days passed, and I noticed small changes in Tom's behavior. He started asking more questions, about my schedule, about auditions, about where I was going, and who I was meeting. At first, it was subtle, but soon it became clear that he was digging for something, looking for answers I wasn't willing to give. One evening, I came home later than usual. I'd been with Daniel again, going over scripts that were just excuses to keep me close. As I walked through the door, I could feel Tom's tension even before I saw him. He was sitting at the kitchen table, papers scattered around, his laptop open. His eyes were red like he hadn't slept. "Hey, you're up late," I said, forcing a smile, though my heart pounded in my chest. I had grown too accustomed to this double life, but Tom's quiet intensity was unsettling. "Yeah, couldn't sleep," he replied, his voice flat. He didn't look up from his laptop, but I could see the faint reflection of a web page, an article about Daniel Stone, complete with photos from last night's industry event. The event where I was supposed to be auditioning. I felt a chill run down my spine. He wasn't just suspicious, he was looking for proof. Tom finally closed the laptop and stood up, his movements slow, deliberate. He walked over to me, and for a moment, I thought he might confront me and demand answers. Instead, he simply wrapped his arms around me, pulling me close in a way that felt desperate, almost pleading. "I miss you, Em," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "It feels like you're slipping away." I swallowed hard, fighting back tears. The guilt was suffocating, wrapping around me like a vice. I wanted to tell him everything, to confess and beg for forgiveness, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Instead, I just held him tighter, burying my face in his shoulder, hiding from the truth. "I'm still here," I lied, my voice barely audible. "I'm not going anywhere." But Tom wasn't convinced. He started keeping track of my comings and goings, discreetly following me when he could, piecing together the inconsistencies in my stories. And then, one day, he saw it for himself. I was sitting with Daniel at a small cafe, far from the prying eyes of Hollywood. It was supposed to be a quick meeting, a check-in about the project, but the way Daniel reached across the table, his hand brushing mine, told a different story. I pulled away, conscious of my surroundings, but it was too late. Tom was there, just beyond the window, watching as the truth unfolded before his eyes. The look on his face was one of betrayal and heartbreak, a silent realization that everything he feared was true. He didn't confront me that day. He didn't need to. The damage was done, and the chasm between us had grown too wide to ignore. When I got home that night, Tom was already gone. His things were still there, his scent lingering in the air, but the absence was deafening. I stood in the empty living room, my mind reeling. This was the moment I had dreaded, the point of no return. The first lie had been so easy, a small deception that I convinced myself was harmless. But now, with every lie that followed, I was losing Tom piece by piece. And as much as I wanted to blame Daniel, the industry, or the pressure to succeed, I knew that the real fault lay within me. I had chosen this path, and now I was watching my life unravel, one painful truth at a time. I didn't see Tom for days after he left. I told myself it was better this way, that he needed space, that we both did. But deep down, I knew I had crossed a line we couldn't come back from. My guilt weighed on me like a constant, heavy cloak, and no matter how many roles I played on screen, I couldn't escape the one I was playing in real life, the liar, the betrayer, the wife who wasn't who she pretended to be. While I tried to focus on my career, Tom had other plans. He hadn't left Los Angeles, he was still here, quietly biding his time, waiting for the right moment to strike. He had always been the kind of man who thought things through, who never acted on impulse. And now, with a marriage in ruins and a heart full of anger, Tom was plotting his revenge. Tom began digging into Daniel's life, combing through public records, financial statements, and every shady corner of the internet that might hold a clue to the man's true nature. The more he searched, the deeper the rot seemed to go. What he found wasn't just infidelity or personal betrayal, it was corruption on a grand scale. Daniel Stone wasn't just a manipulative producer. He was a man who thrived on power, money, and secrets. And Tom was determined to expose every last one of them. It started with whispers, anonymous tips to journalists about suspicious financial dealings, sudden drops in box office revenues that didn't match the official numbers, and actresses who had quietly disappeared from the spotlight after working with Daniel. Tom tracked down former assistants, scorned investors, and old business partners, piecing together a web of deceit that went far beyond Hollywood gossip. As Tom dug deeper, he uncovered proof that Daniel had been siphoning money from his productions, laundering it through offshore accounts. But it wasn't just about the money, there were hints of something darker, rumors of blackmail, of Daniel using his power not just to advance his career, but to control those around him. Actresses who had risen to fame under his wing spoke in hushed tones of uncomfortable meetings, of contracts that demanded more than just talent, of favors that went far beyond professional obligations. The stories were ugly, and Tom was determined to make them public. He meticulously collected emails and phone records, and even managed to speak with a few of the women Daniel had wronged. Each story painted a picture of a man who saw everyone as a tool, a pawn in his endless game of power. But as Tom connected the dots, he stumbled upon something he hadn't expected, something that shook him to his core. Among the countless files and articles, Tom found a name that didn't belong. A small, almost forgotten note in a private investigator's report, an entry that mentioned a young girl, just 12 years old. Her name was Lily, and she was registered with a foster family in a quiet suburb far from the glitter of Hollywood. Tom's heart stopped as he read the description: blonde hair, blue eyes, a smile that looked heartbreakingly familiar. His mind raced back to the fleeting mentions of Emily's past, the few details she had ever shared about her life before they met. There had never been a hint of a child. Never any sign that she had carried this secret for so long. The pieces began to fit together most badly. Emily had a daughter she had never told him about, a daughter she had hidden from the world. Tom couldn't let it go. He needed answers, and he knew he wouldn't get them from Emily, not now. So, he drove to the address listed in the report, a modest house on a quiet street. He parked across the road, his mind spinning with questions he didn't know how to ask. Was this why Emily had been so distant? So desperate to keep her career intact? Was she protecting Lily from something or someone? The foster parents were kind but weary, their faces lined with the stress of raising a child who carried more pain than they could ever fully understand. They spoke of Lily with love, but there was something in their eyes, fear, maybe, or sorrow, that told Tom this little girl had seen more than she ever should have. She's had a rough time, the foster mother explained quietly, glancing up the stairs where Lily's room was. Her birth mother arranged for her to stay with us. Said it was for the best. But lately, there's been some trouble. What kind of trouble? Tom asked, his heart pounding. The woman hesitated. Some people came around asking about her. They said they were from the industry, but they didn't look right. We didn't say anything, but Lily's been scared ever since. Tom felt a cold rush of dread. This wasn't just about Emily's past. This was something dangerous, something that went beyond her career or their broken marriage. He thanked the foster parents and left, his mind racing with the implications. Lily was in danger, and whether Emily knew it or not, the walls were closing in. Back in his car, Tom sat in silence, staring at the house. Lily was more than just a secret, she was a vulnerability, a hidden part of Emily's life that could be exploited by the very people Tom was trying to expose. The stakes were higher than he had ever imagined. Tom had started this journey looking for revenge, hoping to tear down the man who had taken everything from him. But now, it was no longer just about Daniel Stone or the lies that had torn his life apart. It was about protecting a child who had been caught in the crossfire of adult ambition and deceit. As Tom drove away, his resolve hardened. He would expose Daniel, no matter the cost, but he would also make sure Lily was safe. Emily had made her choices, but Lily was innocent. She deserved better than the world she'd been thrust into, and Tom would do whatever it took to make sure she didn't pay the price for her mother's sins. And so, the plan for revenge transformed. It wasn't just about bringing down Daniel Stone. It was about saving a little girl who had been hidden away for too long. I sat in the dimly lit living room, the silence pressing in on me like a weight I couldn't bear. Tom's absence had left a void that I tried to fill with work, meetings, with anything that would keep me from facing the reality of what I'd done. But nothing could distract me from the truth anymore. My carefully constructed world was unraveling, and I could no longer hide from the choices that had led me here. It was late, and I had just finished another grueling day on set. The house felt empty, echoing with the memories of a life that now seemed so far away. I poured myself a glass of wine, hoping it would dull the sharp edges of my guilt, but it did nothing to quiet the storm raging inside me. I couldn't keep pretending, not anymore. My phone rang, and for a moment, I considered ignoring it. But when I saw the number, one I hadn't called in years, I knew I couldn't. It was the foster mother, Lily's guardian, and the only person who knew the truth about the daughter I had kept hidden for so long. "Hello?" I answered, my voice barely above a whisper. "Emily, it's happening again." The woman's voice trembled on the other end. "Those people, they were back, asking questions. Lily's terrified. I don't know what to do." Panic surged through me. This wasn't the first time Lily had been targeted, but it was the first time I felt completely powerless to protect her. Daniel's shadow loomed large over every part of my life, and now it had reached her, too. He had known about Lily from the beginning, using my secret as leverage, silently pulling the strings while I danced to his tune. "Keep her safe," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm coming to you. Don't let anyone near her." I hung up, my heart racing. I had spent years pretending Lily didn't exist, not because I didn't love her, but because I loved her too much. My mind flashed back to the day I made the hardest decision of my life, the day I gave up my baby to strangers, hoping it would save us both. I was just 22 then, still a struggling actress, trying to make a name for myself in an industry that chews you up and spits you out if you show even a hint of vulnerability. The pregnancy was unplanned, a mistake in the eyes of my then agent, who had all but ordered me to make it disappear. "It's your choice, of course," she'd said, her voice cool and detached, "but if you keep this baby, you can kiss your career goodbye." I was desperate, scared, and naive enough to believe that my dreams were all that mattered. I let them arrange everything, a private adoption, sealed records, and a promise that Lily would have a better life than I could ever give her. I had convinced myself that I was doing the right thing, that I was protecting her from the circus of my world. But the truth was, I was protecting myself. Years passed, and I rose to fame faster than I could have ever imagined. I told myself that Lily was safe, that I was safe. But Daniel knew. He always knew. He had used it as a quiet threat, a reminder that my past was never truly buried. And now, with Tom gone and my lies catching up to me, that threat was becoming real. I grabbed my keys and rushed out of the house, driving recklessly through the empty streets of LA. I had to see Lily, to explain everything. I couldn't let Daniel's influence reach her, couldn't let her pay for my mistakes. When I arrived at the foster home, the lights were on, and I could see Lily's silhouette through the window. Her small frame curled up on the couch. She looked so much like me at that age, lost, scared, and trying so hard to be brave. The foster parents greeted me with tight smiles and weary eyes, and I could see the unspoken questions in their expressions. They didn't know the full story, only that I was a woman who had left her daughter behind to chase something else. "She doesn't understand why this is happening," the foster mother said softly, her voice heavy with concern. "She's asking about you, about why you're not there." I nodded, feeling the tears welling up but refusing to let them fall. I stepped into the living room, and for a moment, Lily and I just stared at each other, the unbridgeable gap of years between us. She was a stranger and yet, so familiar. "Hi, Lily," I said, my voice breaking. She looked up at me, her blue eyes wide and filled with questions. "Are you my mom?" she asked, her voice small and unsure. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to pull her into my arms, to promise her that I would never leave again. But I knew it wouldn't be that simple. There was so much she didn't know, so much I had kept from her to protect her, and now it was all crashing down. I said, kneeling beside her. "I'm your mom, and I'm so sorry, Lily. I'm sorry for everything." She stared at me, processing, but didn't pull away when I reached for her hand. "Why did you leave me?" she asked, her voice trembling with the kind of pain only a child can feel. I took a deep breath, fighting back the tears. "I thought I was protecting you. I thought it was the only way to keep you safe." Lily didn't say anything, but the hurt in her eyes spoke volumes. I looked at her and saw every bad decision I had ever made, every moment I had put myself before her. I thought I was shielding her from the dangers of my world, but I had only made her more vulnerable. I spent the next hour telling her as much of the truth as I could, about the pressures I'd faced, about Daniel, about why I had hidden her away. I didn't sugarcoat it, and I didn't try to make myself the hero. I owed her that much. As the night wore on, I realized that protecting Lily was the only thing that mattered now. Daniel's power was growing, and he would use whatever leverage he had to maintain control. He had been one step ahead of me for years, but not anymore. I wouldn't let him hurt my daughter, not while I still had the strength to fight. I kissed Lily goodnight, promising her that I would make this right. I didn't know how yet, but I knew one thing for certain: Daniel Stone would no longer hold my secrets over me. I had lost so much to him, my marriage, my integrity, and nearly my child. But now I had nothing left to lose. As I left the house, the weight of my past lifted, just slightly. I wasn't the perfect mother, and I never would be, but I was done hiding. Lily was my daughter, and I would burn down my entire career, my entire world if it meant keeping her safe from Daniel's reach. The next move was mine, and this time, I wouldn't let anyone else dictate how it would play out. I knew it was only a matter of time before Daniel would confront me. He never missed a chance to remind people who held the power, and I was no exception. After all, he had been pulling my strings for years, always there in the background, whispering just the right words to keep me in line. But now, things were different. Lily was in the open, and I couldn't go back to pretending she didn't exist. I couldn't keep playing Daniel's game. It was late when Daniel called. His voice was calm, almost too calm, but there was a coldness in his tone that sent a chill down my spine. "Emily," he began, with that familiar false warmth. "We need to talk." I wanted to hang up, to cut him off, but I couldn't. "Not yet. What do you want, Daniel?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, I think you know," he replied, and I could practically hear his smirk through the phone. "I've been hearing some disturbing things lately. Rumors, whispers, about you, about Tom, and about certain past mistakes." My breath hitched. He was testing the waters, waiting to see how much I knew. How far he could push me. But I wasn't the scared young actress he had met all those years ago. I had lost too much to be intimidated by his threats now. "Tom has nothing to do with this," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew they were a lie. Tom had everything to do with this, and Daniel knew it. Emily, he sighed, almost pityingly. Let's not play games. You've always been smart. You know exactly what's at stake here. Your career, your precious daughter, even your husband, although I hear he's been a bit of a problem lately. My heart pounded in my chest. He knew. About Tom's investigation, about Lily, about everything. And worse, he wasn't just talking about ending my career. He was threatening my family. I clenched my fist, anger bubbling up alongside the fear. Leave them out of this, I snapped. You want to ruin me? Fine, but don't you dare touch them? Daniel laughed softly, a sound that sent a shiver of dread through me. Oh, Emily, you still don't get it, do you? I don't have to touch them. All I need to do is whisper the right words in the right ears. And your whole world comes crashing down. The studios, the endorsements, the contracts, all gone. You'll be finished. He paused, letting the weight of his threat sink in before he continued. And as for Lily, well, accidents happen. People get hurt when they get too close to the truth. And Tom? He's poking around places he really shouldn't. Some people don't take kindly to that sort of thing. I felt my throat tighten, the reality of Daniel's words hitting me with brutal clarity. This wasn't just about money or fame. This was about survival. He had connections far beyond Hollywood, ties to people who operated in shadows, where contracts and negotiations meant nothing. I had heard whispers before, rumors of his dealings with dangerous figures, but I had always dismissed them as idle gossip. Now, I wasn't so sure. Why are you doing this? I asked, my voice cracking under the weight of my fear. I've done everything you asked. I've kept my mouth shut. Isn't that enough? For now, Daniel replied coolly. But the moment you become a liability, Emily, all bets are off. I control your image, your roles, and your life. Do you think you can just walk away? You're mine. You always have been. He hung up, leaving me standing in my kitchen, clutching the phone like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. My mind raced, replaying his threats over and over. Daniel was right about one thing. I was in too deep, and I had dragged everyone I loved down with me. I had to warn Tom, but when I called him, there was no answer. Panic surged through me as I dialed again and again, each unanswered ring feeding the growing dread in my chest. Tom was stubborn, but he wasn't reckless, not usually. If he was ignoring my calls, it meant he was in the middle of something dangerous, something he couldn't walk away from. I finally reached him hours later, his voice strained and distant. He was holed up in some dive bar downtown, meeting with one of Daniel's old associates, a washed-up producer with a grudge and nothing left to lose. Tom was convinced this man had the key to bringing Daniel down, but all I could hear was the desperation in his voice, the same desperation that had led me down this path in the first place. Tom, you need to stop, I pleaded, my voice cracking. Daniel knows what you're doing. He's not going to just let this go. I'm not backing down, Emily, Tom snapped, his frustration boiling over. I'm not afraid of him. Maybe you should be, I shouted, the fear and anger finally breaking free. This isn't just about you or me anymore. It's about Lily. It's about everything we've been trying to protect. There was a long silence on the other end, and for a moment, I thought he might listen, that he might finally understand how far Daniel's reach truly was. But then he spoke, and I knew I had lost him. I can't stop, Emily. Not now. Not when we're so close. You should have told me about Lily from the start. I would have fought for her, for us. But now, this is the only way I can make things right. I hung up, my hands trembling. Tom was heading straight into Daniel's trap, and there was nothing I could do to stop him. I had thought I could control this, that I could keep my past hidden and my family safe. But I was wrong. Every lie, every compromise had led us here, to a place where no one was safe. Daniel's threats hung over me like a dark cloud, suffocating and relentless. He wasn't going to let us walk away unscathed. As I sat alone in my empty house, I realized that the only way out was to confront the man who had held my life in his hands for far too long. But facing Daniel meant risking everything, my career, my daughter, my husband's life. It meant exposing the darkest parts of myself and stepping into a battle I wasn't sure I could win. But I had no choice. I had to fight, not just for me, but for Tom and Lily. Because if I didn't, Daniel would destroy us all. The air was heavy that night, thick with the kind of tension that clings to your skin and sets every nerve on edge. I had a sinking feeling that something was wrong, a gnawing dread that I couldn't shake no matter how hard I tried to focus. Tom was still ignoring my calls, and every unanswered ring reminded us of just how far we'd fallen. The man I'd once trusted with every secret was now on his own, tangled in a web of lies and danger that neither of us could escape. Tom had been chasing leads for weeks, each one more reckless than the last. He was determined to expose Daniel, to bring him down once and for all, but his desperation had clouded his judgment. When he told me about the meeting he'd set up with some anonymous source, someone who supposedly had the final piece of the puzzle, I knew it was a trap. Daniel's influence ran too deep, and Tom was playing with fire. I drove through the city in a frenzy, headlights blurring as I sped toward the dingy warehouse where Tom had agreed to meet this so-called informant. My hands gripped the wheel, white-knuckled, as I replayed Daniel's threats in my mind. He had warned me that Tom was crossing a line, that he wouldn't hesitate to make an example of him. I had to stop Tom before it was too late. The warehouse loomed ahead, its dark, looming structure a grim reminder of the dangerous path we were on. I parked a block away, the thudding of my heart drowning out the sounds of the city. I could see Tom's car in the distance, parked haphazardly near the entrance. It was dark, the only light coming from a flickering street lamp that cast eerie shadows on the cracked pavement. I dialed Tom's number again, my fingers trembling. It rang, once, twice, and then, finally, he answered. "Tom, you need to get out of there," I said, my voice urgent and panicked. "It's a setup. This isn't." But before I could finish, the line went dead, cut off by a deafening noise that sent a jolt of terror through me. Gunshots. I froze, my mind struggling to process what was happening. I could hear shouting, the chaotic sounds of a struggle, and then another shot, a single, sharp crack that echoed in the night. I ran toward the warehouse, my breath hitching as I pushed through the heavy doors. The scene before me was like something out of a nightmare. Tom was on the ground, blood pooling beneath him, his face pale and eyes wide with shock. I could see the fear, the realization that this was the end, that he'd been outplayed in the most brutal way possible. "No!" I screamed, rushing to his side. His hand reached for mine, weak and trembling, and I could see the pain etched in every line of his face. "Emily, I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice barely audible. His breath was ragged, each word a struggle. I clutched his hand, tears streaming down my face. "Don't you dare leave me," I begged, my voice breaking. You can't do this." But there was no saving him. Tom's grip loosened, his eyes glazing over as the life slipped away. I felt my heart shatter, the weight of his death crushing me in ways I couldn't even begin to comprehend. This wasn't just a loss, it was the end of everything we had fought for, every lie we had told ourselves to survive. I looked around, the chaos of the scene slowly coming into focus. The men who had set the trap were already gone, their faces hidden behind masks, their identities as shadowy and elusive as Daniel's influence. This was no random act of violence. This was an execution, a message, and I knew exactly who was behind it. Daniel had crossed every line, and he had done it without a second thought. He had warned me, but I had been too blinded by my guilt and fear to see the truth. Tom was dead because of me, because of the secrets I had kept and the choices I had made. I had thought I could outsmart Daniel, but I had underestimated just how ruthless he could be. As I stood there, cradling Tom's lifeless body, a cold realization washed over me. I was alone. Truly alone. Tom was gone, and Lily was still in danger. Daniel had made sure of that. He had orchestrated everything with chilling precision, leaving me with nothing but the wreckage of my life and the unrelenting fear that he would come for Lily next. I staggered out of the warehouse, my mind numb with grief and rage. There was no one I could trust, no safe place left to turn. Daniel's threats were no longer just words, they were a brutal reality that I couldn't escape. He had taken everything from me, and now he was coming for what little I had left. But as the tears dried on my cheeks, replaced by a cold, burning resolve, I made a silent vow. Daniel had underestimated me, too. He thought he could break me, could use fear to keep me in line. But he had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Tom's death wouldn't be in vain. I would protect Lily, no matter the cost. And I would make sure that Daniel paid for every single thing he had done. I barely remember how I made it home that night, numb and hollow, with Tom's last words echoing in my mind. My life felt like a series of broken pieces, Tom, gone, Lily, hidden away, and me, left to pick up the shattered remains of a future that had slipped through my fingers. I sank into the darkness of my living room, staring blankly at the framed photographs on the wall, pictures of a life that no longer felt real. But I didn't have the luxury of grief. Not now. Not with Lily still in danger. The fragile illusion of safety I had built around her was crumbling, and I knew Daniel wouldn't hesitate to use her against me. He had already proven that nothing was off limits. Tom's death was a clear warning. Daniel would stop at nothing to keep his secrets buried, and if I didn't act, Lily would be next. I couldn't let that happen. I wouldn't. For years, I had allowed myself to be controlled, manipulated, and silenced. I had made every compromise and swallowed every lie, all in the name of protecting my career and my family. But now, there was nothing left to lose, nothing except Lily. The fear that had once paralyzed me was gone, replaced by a cold, steely resolve. I would not be Daniel's pawn any longer. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my contacts, searching for the right person. In Hollywood, everyone has secrets and everyone is connected. I had spent years building relationships and forging alliances, and now, those connections would be my weapon. I knew who I needed to call: journalists who had been circling Daniel like vultures for years, hungry for any scrap of scandal that could bring him down. The first call was to Marissa James, a seasoned investigative reporter with a reputation for exposing the darkest corners of the industry. She had tried to interview me countless times, sniffing around the edges of my life, but I had always kept my distance. Now, I needed her more than ever. "Emily?" Marissa's voice crackled on the other end, surprised but intrigued. "This is unexpected. I have something you want," I said, cutting straight to the point. "Information about Daniel Stone, but I need your help." There was a pause, and I could almost hear her mind racing on the other end, calculating the risks and rewards. "I'm listening." We met the next day in a quiet cafe, tucked away from the prying eyes of paparazzi and industry insiders. I slid into the booth, my nerves frayed, but my resolve unshaken. Marissa's eyes sparkled with curiosity and a hint of skepticism, but as I began to speak, laying out everything I knew about Daniel's crimes, his financial schemes, his coercion of young actresses, and his ties to dangerous people, her expression shifted. She could sense the gravity of what I was revealing. "This is big, Emily," Marissa said, her voice hushed. "But it's dangerous. You're going up against a man who controls half of Hollywood. If this goes public—" "I don't care," I interrupted, my voice steady and unyielding. "He killed my husband. He's threatened my daughter. I'm done being afraid." Marissa nodded, pulling out her notepad and starting to jot down details. I watched her work, the sharp focus in her eyes, and I felt something close to hope for the first time in a long while. She was the key to turning the tables on Daniel, exposing him to the monster he was. I handed her a flash drive, loaded with every piece of evidence Tom had gathered before his death. Financial records, emails, secret contracts, everything Daniel had tried so hard to keep hidden. "This is just the beginning," I said. "There's more, but I need you to run with this. Dig deeper. Bring him down." Marissa looked at me, her expression a mix of admiration and caution. "You're putting yourself in a lot of danger, Emily. Are you sure you're ready for what comes next?" I thought of Tom, of Lily, of all the years I had spent living in the shadow of Daniel's power. "I'm ready," I said, my voice unwavering. "It's time the world knows who Daniel Stone is." As Marissa left, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time: control. For years, I had been at the mercy of men like Daniel. But now, I was the one pulling the strings. I knew Daniel would retaliate, that he would fight back with every resource at his disposal. But I was no longer the scared actress desperate to keep her secrets. I was a mother, and I was ready to do whatever it took to protect my daughter. I spent the next few days reaching out to every connection I had left, other reporters, lawyers, and former colleagues who had fallen out of Daniel's favor. Each call was a calculated move, a step closer to dismantling the empire he had built on lies and manipulation. Every piece of information was a nail in his coffin, every whispered secret a weapon I could use. And then, the stories started to break. One by one, the headlines flooded the news: Hollywood producer under investigation for fraud and coercion, expose reveals decades of abuse and corruption, Daniel Stone's empire on the brink of collapse. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Investors pulled out, projects were cancelled, and the once untouchable Daniel Stone found himself at the center of a storm he couldn't control. I watched it all unfold from the safety of my home, my heart pounding with a mix of satisfaction and anxiety. Daniel would come for me, I knew that much. But I was no longer the woman who had cowered in his shadow. I had faced my worst fears, and I had nothing left to hide. As I stood by the window, watching the city below, I thought of Lily. She was my reason, my anchor, and the one thing that kept me moving forward. I had made mistakes, terrible ones, but I was done running from them. Daniel had underestimated me, and now, he was paying the price. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, I felt like I was winning. And I would keep fighting, not just for my daughter, but for every woman Daniel had tried to silence. The truth was out, and there was no turning back. I watched from the back seat of my car as the flashing lights of police cruisers painted the Los Angeles skyline in shades of red and blue. The mansion that once symbolized Daniel's power, perched high in the Hollywood Hills, was now the scene of his downfall. Swarms of reporters crowded the gates, their cameras flashing like a relentless storm, capturing every moment as Daniel Stone, Hollywood's untouchable king, was led out in handcuffs. He looked smaller now, stripped of his arrogance, his designer suit wrinkled and disheveled. The man who had orchestrated my worst nightmares was no longer invincible. The evidence I'd helped unearth had finally caught up with him, the fraudulent schemes, the exploitation of young actresses, the manipulation that had left so many in ruins. It was all unraveling, and there was no escape this time. I should have felt triumphant, but as I watched Daniel disappear into the back of the police car, all I felt was an overwhelming emptiness. Tom was still gone, and the weight of everything I'd lost was crushing. This victory had come at an unimaginable cost. Later that night, I found myself standing in front of a crowd of reporters, the harsh glow of their lights blinding. I had never been on this side of the cameras before, usually. I was the one being celebrated, admired, and envied. But tonight was different. Tonight, I was here to tell the truth, no matter what it cost me. The microphone felt heavy in my hand as I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Faces stared back at me, some curious, some skeptical, others sympathetic. They were here for a story, and I was ready to give it to them. "I'm Emily Richards," I began, my voice echoing through the silence. "And for years, I've been complicit in my silence. I let fear control me. Let the lure of fame and success blind me to the consequences of my actions. But today, I stand before you to make amends." I paused, letting my words sink in. The cameras were rolling, capturing every word, every flicker of emotion. This was my confession, my reckoning. I was part of a system that protected men like Daniel Stone, men who abused their power and destroyed lives without consequence. I stayed quiet when I should have spoken up. I chose my career over my family, and in doing so, I betrayed the people I loved the most. My husband, Tom, paid the ultimate price for my mistakes. And my daughter, Lily, who I abandoned to protect my public image. I could feel the tears welling up, but I refused to let them fall. I had cried enough. This was about accountability, about owning the choices that had led me to this moment. When I first met Daniel, I thought I was making a harmless deal. A role, a chance to stay relevant in a cutthroat industry. But it wasn't harmless. It was a lie, one that spiraled out of control and cost me everything. I'm here today because the truth matters more than any award or paycheck. I'm here because no one else should have to go through what I did. I could see the reporters scribbling notes, their expressions a mix of shock and intrigue. This was the kind of story that would make headlines for weeks. A glamorous actress turning against the powerful producer who had once been her mentor and lover. But this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about doing the right thing, even if it was too late. "I want to apologize to my daughter," I continued, my voice breaking slightly. "Lily, if you're watching this, know that you were never my mistake. My mistake was thinking that I could keep you safe by hiding you, by pretending you didn't exist. But you are the best part of me, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to make things right." The crowd erupted with questions, but I had said all I needed to. I stepped back from the podium, my heart pounding, and let the weight of my confession settle. I had laid myself bare, sacrificing what little remained of my reputation for the chance to save my daughter's future and honor Tom's memory. I had no idea what would come next, but for the first time, I felt a strange sense of peace. As the weeks passed, the fallout from Daniel's arrest was swift and merciless. His empire crumbled under the weight of scandal, and his name dragged through the mud in every newspaper, every tabloid. He was no longer a Hollywood power player, he was a pariah, an example of the industry's darkest side finally brought to light. But in the chaos, something unexpected happened. The public rallied around me, not as an actress, but as a woman who had made mistakes and found the courage to own them. Letters of support flooded in, strangers reaching out to share their own stories of loss and regret, and mothers who understood the impossible choices I had made. It wasn't redemption, but it was a start. Offers for roles dried up, but that didn't matter anymore. I had spent my whole life chasing the next big part, the next headline, the next validation that I was enough. But none of it compared to the quiet moments I now treasured with Lily, learning to be a mother again after so many years of distance. She was wary at first, unsure of the woman who had been little more than a name whispered in secret, but we were rebuilding, one day at a time. The road ahead was uncertain, and the scars of my choices would never fully heal. But I was no longer hiding. I had faced my fears, confronted my past, and fought for the only thing that truly mattered. And in the end, that was enough. As I sat with Lily, watching her play in the backyard, I thought of Tom. I wished he could see us now, see the life we were trying to build from the ruins of what had been. I hoped, wherever he was, that he knew his death had not been in vain. I would carry the weight of my decisions for the rest of my life, but I had finally found the strength to stand on my own. And no matter what came next, I knew I would never let anyone take that away from me again.